I lost my hearing the moment the world turned gray. It wasn't sudden. It felt like the sea pulling away before the wave hits the sound, fading, thinning, until there was nothing left but the heavy breath of silence pressing against my chest. I remember that morning vividly. The city was still half asleep, London wrapped in a pale mist. The crosswalk lights blinked red and green in perfect rhythm, but I couldn't hear the impatient horns or the rain tapping against the asphalt. Only movement. Only color. They told me later that a car came from the wrong lane, that the crash was loud enough to shake the cafe windows. But to me, it was the quietest thing I'd ever known. When I woke up in the hospital, there was a kind of silence that wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the kind that hollowed out the inside of you. My mother was crying beside my bed, lips trembling, but I couldn't hear her. Her tears fell soundlessly on my hand, like snow that refused to melt. That was 3 years ago. Now, I paint. It started as therapy, colors, shapes, movement. But painting became the only way I could remember sound. Every stroke, every hue, was a note in the song I no longer heard. Blue for the sound of the rain, yellow for laughter, gray for goodbye. When people ask what I paint, I tell them, I paint what silence looks like. The gallery where I work smells of turpentine and coffee, a strange mix, but somehow comforting. My paintings hang along white walls, explosions of color that whisper what I cannot say aloud. I've learned to read lips, to smile at polite compliments, to nod when someone says beautiful work. But truthfully, I don't always know what they're saying. Sometimes I just follow their eyes, their gestures, the rhythm of their breathing. That afternoon, I was preparing a new exhibition called The Sound of Color. I wanted it to feel like standing inside a song you can't quite remember. And that's when I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the gallery, back straight, dark coat still wet from the rain. He didn't look around like the others did. His eyes, gray steady, were fixed on one particular painting, a swirl of crimson and silver titled Heartbeat. He moved closer, lips parting as if to say something. I watched carefully, my eyes trained on his mouth. Do you want to hear again? I froze. People always spoke about my art, my courage, my story. But no one had ever asked that question. He stepped closer, not out of pity, but precision. There was something clinical about the way he observed the world, yet something unbearably gentle when his eyes met mine. He introduced himself, at least I think he did. I caught the words Pei Xingchuan on his lips, soft and deliberate. Then he handed me a card. Dr. Pei Xingchuan, Cognitive Neuroscience, Auditory Memory Research Institute. I looked at the text, then back at him. He said something else, slower this time, letting me read. I study how memories of sound shape emotion. Your work, he paused, pointing to Heartbeat, is unlike anything I've seen. You paint frequencies. I wanted to ask how he knew, but I couldn't find the words, and he seemed to sense that. He picked up a small notepad from his coat and began writing. Would you like to visit my lab? I think you can help me understand how silence remembers sound. I stared at the words. Something inside me shifted: curiosity, fear, hope, I couldn't tell. I nodded. His lab was in a quiet corner of the city, overlooking the Thames. It wasn't what I expected. No sterile white walls, no cold instruments. Instead, the space felt alive with soft amber light, shelves of glass tubes filled with colored liquid, and speakers humming with low vibrations I could feel through the floor. He explained through writing and gesture. Each color corresponded to a frequency, each vibration a fragment of sound memory. Even when the ears stop hearing, he wrote, the body still remembers. He placed my hand over a metallic plate that vibrated faintly. Then he switched on a soft blue light. The vibration deepened. My fingertips tingled. This is the sound of rain, he mouthed. Something inside me cracked open. Blue. The same blue I'd painted 1,000 times. The one that lived in my mind whenever I remembered the world before silence. Tears blurred my vision. He noticed. You felt it, he said softly. I nodded. For the first time in years, I didn't just see color, I heard it, somewhere deep inside. Days turned into weeks. I kept returning to his lab, each session unlocking something I thought I'd lost forever. Once, he handed me a cup of tea and wrote, Close your eyes. What color is my voice? I smiled faintly, thinking he was teasing me. But when I focused on the vibration through his hand, I felt warmth, gentle, steady, amber. Orange, I wrote back. He looked surprised, then smiled. That's the color I thought you'd choose. One evening, as I was leaving, he called my name. I turned. His lips moved slowly, each word deliberate. You're not broken, Chingy. You just hear differently. It hit me harder than I expected. Because until that moment, I didn't realize how much I needed someone to say it. Back home, I stood before my easel, staring at a blank canvas. The city outside was quiet, but I could feel it, the hum of buses, the whisper of wind through narrow streets, the echo of footsteps. Silence wasn't empty anymore. It was alive. I picked up my brush and painted in long, sweeping strokes, blue bleeding into violet, gold dissolving into white. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from something else. Something like music. When I was done, I stepped back. The painting pulsed with color, almost breathing. In the corner, I wrote its name, the day I heard again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of his eyes, his voice I never heard, his words I could still feel. Maybe the world hadn't gone silent after all. Maybe I just needed someone who could show me what silence was trying to say. And for the first time in 3 years, I dreamt of sound. Not voices, not music, just the steady rhythm of two hearts beating in the same quiet room. He said every sound has a color. I think every silence does too. The first time I stepped into his lab after the exhibition, I noticed something different. The air hummed faintly, like a heartbeat under glass. A low vibration rippled through the wooden floor, as if the building itself was breathing. Dr. Pace smiled when he saw me, soft, contained, the kind of smile that didn't ask for permission to exist. He gestured toward a table covered in glass bowls, each filled with colored sand. These, he mouthed slowly, are frequencies. He switched on a machine. The bowls began to tremble, each vibrating at a different rhythm. The yellow sand danced in spirals. Blue rippled like the surface of water. He let me touch the table, my fingertips catching the rhythm of invisible songs. Do you see? He asked. I nodded. You're hearing through your skin. For a moment, I wanted to cry, but instead, I painted right there, beside him. Blue merged into white, white melted into violet. The colors seemed alive, moving with the pulse beneath the floor. When I finished, he was staring not at the painting, but at me. There was something unreadable in his eyes, as if he saw through the colors straight into the space I'd spent years trying to fill. Your perception of color matches specific sound frequencies, he wrote on his notepad. It's rare. Your brain still maps auditory patterns. I didn't understand everything he said, but I understood the feeling, like finding a forgotten door that finally opened. That evening, he offered to walk me home. London was draped in twilight, the streetlights flickering through mist. I couldn't hear the city's noise, but I could feel it, the hum of electricity, the rush of the river, the pulse of footsteps in the rain. We stopped by the riverbank. He turned toward me, his breath visible in the cold air. When my mother lost her hearing, he began slowly, letting me read his lips. She stopped painting, but she used to say colors are the echoes of sound. I think she was right. He smiled faintly, the kind of sadness that hides behind warmth. She passed away 5 years ago. Since then, I've been trying to understand what she meant. I wanted to say something comforting, but words felt heavy, useless. So I took out my sketch pad and drew a single blue line across the page. This is what her voice feels like, I wrote. He looked at it for a long time, then whispered, blue. That was her favorite color. Weeks passed. Our sessions became less like research and more like conversations, in another language, one made of gestures, colors, vibrations. He showed me a new experiment, a circular platform connected to sound frequencies. When he activated it, waves of vibration ran through the metal, and he asked me to stand barefoot on it. I hesitated, but did as he asked. At first it was strange, the floor humming beneath my feet, the air trembling around me. Then I realized something. Each frequency painted a color behind my eyelids. When he changed the settings, I felt warmth, deep orange, fading into pink. Then another frequency. It was like standing inside a song, not hearing it, but becoming it. I opened my eyes. He was watching me carefully. "What did you feel?" he mouthed. "I didn't feel it," I said slowly, shaping the words. "I saw it." He smiled, writing. "Then we're closer than I thought." One night, it rained harder than usual. I stayed late at the lab, finishing a new canvas. The city outside was a blur of reflections, yellow streetlights melting into dark water. The power flickered once, twice, then went out. Only the emergency light glowed faintly in the corner. Dr. Pei lit a candle, its flame small and trembling. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, alive. He looked at me, then pointed to the candle. "What color do you think this silence is?" I watched the flame bend, twist, dance. "Gold," I mouthed. "It's gold." He nodded, his expression unreadable. My mother used to say, gold was the color of goodbye. Something about that sentence made my throat tighten. I wanted to ask why, but I didn't need to. His eyes already told the story. We sat in the dim light, the rain drumming faintly outside the window. He took out his notepad, wrote slowly, deliberately. "If sound has memory, then silence must have its own language too. Maybe that's what you're painting." I read it twice, tracing the words with my fingers. He was right. I wasn't painting loss. I was painting translation, the space where sound becomes feeling, and feeling becomes color. As I prepared to leave, he reached for my hand. Not suddenly, not awkwardly, just enough for me to feel the pulse beneath his skin. "I think," he whispered, his voice almost visible on his lips, "that you hear things the rest of us have forgotten." I looked down, unable to reply. Because somewhere deep inside, I already knew it was true. That night, when I returned home, I painted again. Not rain. Not silence. I painted his eyes. They were not gray anymore. They were the color of sound returning. Sometimes, I paint before I understand what it means. And sometimes, the painting remembers before I do. The gallery was quiet that morning. I was arranging my new canvases for an upcoming show, vibrant, alive, trembling with all the things I could no longer hear. The theme was resonance. As I unwrapped one of the larger pieces, I noticed something strange. A streak of deep red shimmered faintly under the morning light. It wasn't part of the original work. I touched it with my fingers. The pigment was fresh, someone had added it recently. But only I had the keys to this room. On the back of the canvas, there was a mark I didn't remember making, a faint line that looked like the outline of a waveform. I tilted my head. The curve seemed familiar. Then I realized where I'd seen it before. In one of Dr. Pei's recordings, projected during his experiments. The same frequency signature that he said came from his mother's voice. When I showed him the painting, his expression changed. He leaned closer, tracing the red curve with his finger. "This is impossible," he whispered, almost to himself. My mother's recording was never shared outside the lab. I frowned. Maybe I saw it unconsciously. He shook his head slowly. "No, the details match exactly. Every crest, every dip." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the lab filled the silence between us. Then he looked up at me, eyes filled with something that wasn't fear, but recognition. "Chingy," he said carefully, "when you paint, do you remember things that aren't yours?" I froze. I wanted to say no, but part of me wasn't sure. Sometimes when I painted, images came, faces, sounds, feelings that didn't belong to me. I used to think they were imagination. But what if they weren't? He turned on one of the machines and projected the waveform of his mother's voice again. Beside it, he placed a digital scan of my painting. The two patterns overlapped perfectly. "You didn't copy it," he said softly. "You heard it. But that's impossible, unless," he hesitated, "unless you can perceive frequencies beyond the auditory range." He explained with quiet precision. Sound, even when inaudible, can be encoded in vibration, in memory, in emotion. Maybe, through painting, I was translating those residual frequencies into color. But then he said something that sent a chill through me. "There's one more thing. The recording you matched, it wasn't just my mother's voice. There was another frequency mixed in. One that appeared only once, in the final second of her life. He paused. It was the sound of the crash that took her hearing. That night, I couldn't paint. I sat in front of my canvas, hands trembling. For the first time, the colors didn't come to me. How could I have painted something I never saw, never heard? Was I remembering her memory, or his? In the stillness of my apartment, I began to notice something else. A low vibration beneath the floorboards. Soft, steady like a heartbeat buried under wood. I pressed my hand against the wall. The vibration grew stronger, pulsing in waves. I closed my eyes. Behind the darkness, I saw flashes of red, white, blue, and a voice, distant but tender. Don't be afraid of what silence remembers. I opened my eyes, gasping. The words weren't mine, but I had heard them. The next morning, I went to see Dr. Pei. He was sitting by the window, a cup of black coffee untouched beside him. The light through the blinds cut across his face in stripes. I heard something, I said, my voice trembling. Not sound, but words. He didn't look surprised. What did it say? Don't be afraid of what silence remembers. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was a kind of sorrow in them that made my chest ache. That was what my mother wrote on her final painting, he said. The day before she died. The room seemed to shrink around us. Everything, the experiments, the colors, the patterns suddenly felt heavier, more intimate. Chingy, he said quietly, I think you're remembering what sound has forgotten. Later, as dusk fell, we stood side by side at the window. The Thames reflected the dying light, turning silver to black. He turned to me and said something I would never forget. Maybe you didn't lose your hearing. Maybe it just changed shape. I looked at him, the way his words shaped silently in the air, and for a brief, impossible moment, I heard his voice clear, low, and warm, like the first sound after endless winter. I smiled through tears. Maybe silence had never been empty. Maybe it was always waiting for someone to listen differently. End of chapter 3. Next chapter, when the heart speaks louder than sound. Coming next, he said I was never silent to him. I wonder if love has its own frequency, one only hearts can hear. It rained that night. Not the soft kind that whispered, but the kind that spoke in full sentences, heavy and deliberate. The streets of London glistened like liquid glass. I waited inside the lab, watching droplets slide down the window. Dr. Pei was adjusting the light panels, his movements precise but tired. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of machines. When he turned toward me, I noticed the shadows under his eyes. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile people wear when they're trying not to disappear. You haven't painted in days, he mouthed. I nodded. I'm afraid of what might appear, he wrote on the notepad. Maybe what you'll paint isn't something to fear, but something that's been waiting for you to see it. I looked at him. And what if it hurts? He hesitated, then wrote another line. Then it's real. That night, the rain grew louder, beating against the windows like 1,000 small drums. We lost power again. The only light came from the screensaver on his monitor, waves of soft color shifting across the room. He moved closer, sitting beside me on the edge of the work table. For a long time neither of us spoke. It wasn't the silence of distance, it was the kind that hums, alive, waiting. Then he reached out, gently placing my hand against his chest. I could feel it, his heartbeat, steady but trembling beneath my palm. You feel that? He whispered. I nodded. That's how I hear you. The words hit me like light through stained glass, soft, but blinding. Because all this time, I thought silence meant I was invisible. But to him, silence was how he found me. He guided my hand upward, pressing it to his throat. His pulse matched the rhythm of his breathing. He mouthed each word slowly, deliberately, as if sculpting sound out of air. You've never been silent to me. Something inside me cracked. Not in pain but in release. It was like a door unsealing somewhere deep in my chest. I closed my eyes, feeling the vibrations of his voice travel through his skin into mine. It wasn't hearing, but it was. My body translated it into warmth, into color, into a note only I could sense. When I opened my eyes again, he was still watching me. The rain had softened, the city outside wrapped in fog. His hand was still over mine, our pulses overlapping, sinking into the same quiet rhythm. For a long moment, the air between us felt sacred. Not romantic, not clinical, something truer, something unnamed. Then he said, softly, almost to himself, maybe sound was never meant to be heard. Maybe it was meant to be felt. I wanted to answer, but the words wouldn't come. So I painted instead. On a nearby sheet of paper, I drew with trembling hands. One line red, another gold, both weaving, touching, separating, then meeting again. When I finished, I turned it toward him. This, I said slowly, shaping the words with my lips, is what we sound like. He stared for a long time. Then he reached for a pencil and wrote underneath, 2 frequencies, 1 resonance. Later, as the storm passed, he offered me his coat. I slipped it on. It smelled faintly of cedar and rain. We stood by the open door, watching water stream down the steps outside. He turned to me. Do you know what color silence is tonight? I looked at the mist, the reflections, the dim lights across the bridge. It's silver, I said, because it's finally breathing. He smiled. Then maybe we're both learning to listen. That night, I dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't memory. It was something new, warm, endless, alive. In the dream, we stood on a field of color. Each step we took rippled into waves of light, and every breath became a note. He reached out his hand, and when I took it, the world filled with sound. Not the kind I'd lost, but the kind that had always been waiting inside me. When I woke, the silence of my room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like a song paused midair, as if the next note would begin the moment I chose to listen. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the space where love decides to speak. The exhibition hall was filled with light. Rows of canvases hung like windows into other worlds, blue rain, silver wind, gold flame. Each painting shimmered faintly, as though alive, as though humming a song only I could hear. It was the opening night of the color of silence. People moved slowly between the artworks, whispering, pointing, smiling. Their voices didn't reach me, but their expressions did. And that was enough. In the center of the hall stood my final piece. A vast canvas of white, with fragments of color scattered like breath. At its heart, 2 intertwined lines, one crimson, one gold. The title read simply, Resonance. I hadn't seen Dr. Pei all day. He was supposed to arrive early to help me set up, but he never came. His phone went unanswered. A flicker of worry passed through me, then I pushed it down. Maybe he was just late. Maybe he wanted me to stand here alone, to face what we had both been searching for. The crowd blurred into motion. Someone tapped my shoulder. When I turned, a small envelope was being handed to me. The handwriting on it was unmistakable, steady, elegant. It was his. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't be there tonight. There's something I didn't tell you. The condition that took my mother's hearing, it's hereditary. The tests came back last week. I'm losing mine too. I felt my knees weaken. The room tilted slightly, colors bleeding together. Don't be sad. You once told me that silence was where you found yourself. Now it's my turn to listen the way you do. I wanted my last sound to be your colors. At the bottom of the letter, he'd drawn 2 curved lines, red and gold, just like our painting. Underneath them, a final sentence. When you stand before our painting, you'll hear me. I don't remember walking to the canvas, only that my body moved as if guided by something other than will. I stood there, staring at the red and gold lines until my vision blurred. Tears welled, not from grief, but from recognition. A resonance deep in my bones, pulsing with every beat of my heart. And then I felt it. A vibration. Soft, subtle, alive. It started from the floor, through the soles of my shoes, rising through my legs, until it reached my chest. I closed my eyes. The colors behind my eyelids came alive. Blue became warmth, silver became breath, red became heartbeat. And in that space between color and silence, I heard him. You've never been silent to me. The voice wasn't sound. It was a feeling. It was love taking shape in the only way it could. After the crowd dispersed, I stayed behind. The hall was empty now, lit only by the faint glow of the emergency lights. I sat in front of Resonance, sketchbook open on my lap. I began to draw, slowly, carefully, two silhouettes facing each other. Their outlines blurred into waves of color. When I finished, I wrote beneath it, "Silence is not what separates us. It's where we meet." I looked up at the canvas again. The gold shimmered faintly, as if breathing. Somewhere deep within that stillness, I knew he was listening. That night, I walked home along the river. The city lights trembled on the water, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the world was quiet. I felt it humming softly, endlessly. A song made of everything I'd ever loved and lost. I looked up at the night sky. It was dark, endless, and full of silent sound. And I smiled, because I finally understood. Silence was never the end of music. It was its beginning.